This is the Best of Mike and Mike podcast on ESPNRadio.com. The Best of Mike and Mike.
Hey, it's Greeny. Thank you for checking out the Best of Mike and Mike podcast. Here's what we got for you from Tuesday from Cincinnati. The hometown crowd fired up after their guy Todd Frazier won the home run derby. We're talking about that, plus Bruce Bochy, the Commissioner Rob Manfred, and don't miss an unforgettable interview with Johnny Bench.
The Best of Mike and Mike.
And with that, we say we are back and better than ever. Good morning. Wow. And welcome back to Cincinnati. Mike and Mike, ESPN Radio, ESPN2, presented by Progressive Insurance. Subway's Fresh Steak Hotline for the guests, except today, again, they're going to be on hand. The Hall of Famer Johnny Bench will be here. The National League manager Bruce Bochy will be here. The Commissioner of Major League Baseball, Rob Manfred, will be here. And once again, Mike, several thousand of our friends from Cincinnati have come by to say hello. What a terrific event this has been.
Absolutely amazing.
Golic's mic is not working. We're having all kinds of technical issues here. So we'll try and get that working for you in just a moment. But if there's one thing that I think we can absolutely say with certainty, that is that the Greeny kiss of death is officially a thing of the past, and I have Todd Frazier to thank. How about the hometown kid winning the home run derby here yesterday in front of his fans in Cincinnati and doing it in magnificent style? Congratulations to the folks at Major League Baseball. They tinkered with this thing, Mike, and I think last night they came up with something good.
Well, I think last night was absolutely fantastic. It went about a half hour shorter than what it went before, and I think that helped the crowd, at least at home watching on TV. But in stadium there, what was going on, knowing every swing you were going to get a swing for a home run and not 3 takes after one pitch, I thought it moved along well. I thought it was great, and obviously for the hometown fans, they thought it was pretty good as well. But close races, ties going into the extra time, and was actually, that's exactly what happened in the finals as Frazier gets his extra 30 seconds, but he only needed 1 second and 1 swing to win the home run derby. So I thought the new format was fantastic.
I agree. Now, the crowd can hear Golic. I cannot. Can I just confirm that Mike is on the air? Can someone in Bristol confirm in my headset that Golic, he's on the air? Okay. So long as you can hear him, then that's fine. Okay. So that was a good look. At the end of the day, they've tinkered with this thing, right? They've tried to come up with something. Last year, we mentioned this yesterday. We were on the field each of the last 2 years for this home run derby, and it was hard to get the crowd in the building excited about it. I don't know how it played on television. Last night, it was markedly different. I was watching on TV, as I know you were, but from everything you could tell, sitting in a hotel room, that the energy was in the building, the juice was in the building. Now, again, the hometown player going all the way to the final and ultimately winning it helps that enormously, but I think the format helped it as well.
There's no doubt the format helped it. It moved everything along. As I said, to know a guy's going to swing at every pitch is so much better than you know exactly how many they're going to take, because they get into a rhythm, they swing at 1, they take 3. It was so anticlimactic. This one, every single pitch they were normally going to swing. Pujols took a couple here and there, but for the most part, they were swinging for the fences. And because of the possibility of the weather rolling in, they knocked it down from 5 minutes to 4 minutes. And I think that was fantastic. I think it worked perfectly, and I think going forward they'll still keep it at the 4 minutes. I think 5 minutes would have destroyed these hitters even more than it already did. So I think the 4 minutes worked out perfectly.
So do I, and that maybe that's something they'll continue to go with. You can keep playing with this thing, but one way or another, it was better. Now, there were, because of the new format and the way they did it, there were 159 home runs hit in the Derby, which is 51 more than at any other Derby in the history of the event. Again, that's not an apples-to-apples comparison because they did it an entirely different way. And the other thing that I rather liked about it was that it put a lot more pressure on the pitchers. This really became, in some ways, a two-man event rather than a one-man event, because normally you have someone up there, and if he throws 4 bad pitches in a row, it's no big deal. Now that became a factor.
You know what else I loved about this? I love the fact that you had to wait for the ball to come down before he could throw the next pitch. So you couldn't just rapid fire the pitches while the one ball was in the air. Truckee kept even talking about that. Ball's got to get down because a couple of them guys were hitting moonshots, and the clock's running down when they were getting to the end of their at-bat, and that ball needed to hit the ground before they could throw another pitch. So that kind of added to it. So kudos to this change. I thought it was fantastic, and going through Twitter last night as the contest was going on, I didn't see many people who didn't like it. I thought everybody kind of liked it because it moved. Again, it was about a half hour less than what had normally been on TV, but it just seemed you were into it more because basically they were swinging at every pitch, so you were looking for a home run just about every pitch. And we saw, as Greeny mentioned before, the most home runs we've ever seen in a home run derby.
So all things considered, I think a win all the way around for baseball last night, and more importantly for baseball fans. Mike and Mike presented by Progressive Insurance. More independent agents sell Progressive Insurance than any other brand. Find an agent at Progressive.com. Now that's Progressive. As far as the somewhat limited other all-star news worthy of note, 2 more players 25 and under have been added to the roster based on people bowing out and others coming in. So there are now 20 players who will be taking part in tonight's all-star game, at least will be in the dugouts when it begins, who are 25 years of age or under. The 2 who will be starting the game announced yesterday. The starting pitchers are Zach Greinke of the Dodgers and Dallas Keuchel of the Houston Astros. And in case you're saying to yourself, wow, I seem to know one guy really well and the other guy not so well, well, here's a pretty good way of distinguishing between the 2 of them. Do you know how much money Dallas Keuchel is making to pitch for the Astros this year?
I'm going to say not very much.
$525,000. Now, again, you look around the room. That's an enormous amount of money for the average, for basically 99% of the people in the world, but not for a Major League Baseball player. And here's the juxtaposition. Keuchel is making $525,000 this season. Zach Greinke is making $25 million to pitch this season. That's the discrepancy in the salaries for tonight's starting pitchers.
He's certainly making more. Greinke is in his game check than Keuchel is making in his entire year salary. That's just amazing. Great honor, obviously, for him. But, yeah, I imagine he'd like a bit of Greinke's salary.
And I'll tell you what, we have not, and shame on me, I have not given enough credit or spent enough time on the season that Zach Greinke is having, okay? And I think it's because, like most other people, I fall in love with strikeouts and power pitching, and all I've done is talk and talk and talk about what they're doing in Washington and Max Scherzer and everything else. Zach Greinke's ERA is 1.39. That's the lowest ERA at the All-Star break by any pitcher over the last 30 seasons. Now, Joe Torre talked a lot yesterday when he was on our show late in the day about how starting pitchers wear down as the season goes on. So Greinke is by no means assured of finishing the season with an ERA of under 1.5. But if he does, the company that he will put himself in is ridiculous. They sent out a note, Stats and Information, ESPN Stats and Information Group, represented here by our own Hembo, sent out a packet yesterday on that ERA. Now, the only pitcher in Major League Baseball history to have pitched into the live ball era, meaning starting in 1920, to finish a season with an ERA below 1.50 was Bob Gibson in 1968. He finished with an ERA of 1.12. Prior to that, there were 6 pitchers who have finished seasons with an ERA of under 1.5. And they were in 1919, 1918, 15, 14, 14, and 13. It was Walter Johnson like 4 times, Grover Alexander, Smokey Joe Wood, and Dutch Leonard. That's the entire history of the list. It's Bob Gibson and those guys. So that's the first half that Greinke is having here. Again, not to say that he's necessarily going to finish under 1.5, but for the idiots among us, myself included, who keep saying, well, give Max Scherzer the Cy Young right now, we couldn't be more wrong.
And how about the group he's going to face, as far as the lineups tonight, I think, are fantastic for this game. I heard Timmy Kirkshin talking a ton about it, and all our guys yesterday are just somewhat, you talk about the new era of Murderers Row in some of these all-star games, so it's going to be some absolutely epic battles from the mound with some of these pitchers. But you're right, Greinke deserves his love, the only one in the Major League Baseball under 2 now. A.J. Burnett is second in the ERA to 2.11, so Greinke just incredible now. But you're right, it's a long season. We'll see where it ends up.
All right, we are Mike and Mike. We are brought to you by Golfsmith today, proud sponsor of our coverage of the 2015 All-Star Game live here in Cincinnati, which has been a sensational host. I want to mention, among the fun things that we've had a chance to do since we've been here, is there is a zip line. It's just about a block and a half away from where we're currently sitting. We're at Moorline Lager House, which I'm at. Over my left shoulder, I can see the ballpark, and over my right shoulder is the zip line. And Stace and I did it yesterday, and I think we have video, but I know I just put up on my new Instagram page a terrific picture. Stace and I did it. I'm on Instagram at ESPN Greeny if you want to see it. And here's a little video that Nick Nate shot. And I dedicated my trip on the zip line to Chris Carter. Because remember when we were in Indianapolis at the Super Bowl,
out. Yeah.
CC did the walk of shame. CC went up to the top of the zip line and then just got too nervous and walked down. And I was very afraid I was going to do that. But, I had my girl with me, so I had to try and look tough. And we wound up doing it, and it was actually great fun. It was something I never would have thought I'd do, and I actually had a good time.
Yeah, I did it in Indy, and actually I did it when we went on a trip with another couple, our friends at Perianos in Costa Rica, real zip lining. We were going through the,
What do you mean real zip lining?
Real.
How is this not real? What was not real about the zip line? I was up 80 feet.
Yeah, okay. Good for you. You did a great job, son.
I thought it was a pretty brave move.
Really,
I'm the man.
Yeah.
Listen.
Well, he is a guy that walked down the steps of a water slide. When you did a walk of shame at a water slide
in Disney World,
that's just unbelievable.
And the steps were as a spiral staircase. So I literally had to ask people to get out of the way as I was walking down the entire time. And several of them knew who I was, and I'm wearing nothing but a bathing suit. So everything about that was just a hideous experience.
Even for your life, that had to be one of your lower moments, because you had a lot of low moments.
That's in the bottom 100.
Yeah.
I mean, that's right down there with the really bad ones. Okay, Mike and Mike, how about some all-star facts as far as the significance of what this game is tonight? It's the 86th all-star game. The National League leads the all-time series 43-40, and there were 2 ties. The American League has won the last 2 and 14 of the last 18, and we all understand that thanks to the Greeny rule, not because of, but thanks to the Greeny rule, there's a lot of significance riding on the outcome of the game tonight. Home field advantage in the World Series does matter. Joe Torre suggested yesterday it isn't that important, and I understand that the starting pitcher is far more important than the home field advantage. But home field advantage has mattered in the World Series. Since 1985, the team with home field advantage has won 23 of the 29 World Series, and they've won 9 of the last 10 Game 7s. Now, of course, the exception was this past year when San Francisco won Game 7 on the road at Kansas City. But prior to that, you had to go back to 1979 and the We Are Family Pittsburgh Pirates for the last time a team had won Game 7 of the World Series on the road. So it does matter, and that's a good thing. We are coming off a weekend in which there were 3 interleague series. You need something to put a little juice, a little pep, a little excitement in this game, and this does something for it. Whether it does everything for it or not, I don't know. This does something for it. I continue to maintain I like the rule.
And you're completely wrong. It doesn't. This game doesn't need pep, doesn't need juice, it doesn't need this on it. The game is just fine. The home run derby was great last night. The game is just fine. We don't need this. I know we have more interleague play. You can't go on that. Go on the regular season. These guys are playing 162 games. Make that mean something, except for instead of one exhibition game in the middle of July with everything riding. Those numbers, listen, those are important numbers. I'm with you. So you play this game to win it, because that's the rule right now, and you want your league to have home field. So I'm with you there. You play to win it, but it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous to base home field. It's better than the way they did it, which was who had it last year? Okay, the other league.
They just alternated
it. Was, and that's a joke. So that was a joke. This is so small, better. What's a good word for so
infinitesimally?
Yeah, better. That's it. That's it. That's only how much better. How better that is.
You know, you can't spell infinitesimal without infinite. And in my opinion, it's infinitely better.
It's horrible. Best record in the regular season. That's what you do.
We'll ask Bruce Bochy what he thinks. Excuse me, the manager of the National League team. He'll be here later this morning. We had Ned Yost managing the American League team, and he said to us yesterday he likes that it matters. He likes managing this game to win. Here's what he said to us when he was live yesterday on Mike and Mike.
You know, this one's going to count, but I went with Bobby 3 times where it didn't count. And it was just, it was a party. Hey, let's come. Let's everybody have a good time. And, I'll get you in here and get you in here. And if
Which way's better?
This way's better for me. I love it. I love the competition of it. I like, for me, going this whole 2 or 3 weeks, I have looked at my team. What's the best player that can help me win? What can help me win here? Brock Holt. All right, people are going, Brock Holt? Yeah, Brock Holt can play 7 positions. I can put Brock Holt anywhere. He helps me win. Brian Dozier, he helps me win. So my whole focus is winning this game.
Now, that's a very interesting scenario because he puts Brock Holt on the team, right?
Yeah.
The Red Sox have to be represented,
right.
and they could have chosen Xander Bogaerts, or however it is they did it. Brock Holt is tied for 100th in the American League in RBIs.
But he's an all-star. I don't want to take any away from Brock Holt, but come on. This is who Ned Yost is going to lean on because he can play 7 positions to try and win the game. This is what we want in the All-Star game.
Well, it is one of the byproducts of the fact that the All-Star game now does matter, is that he can play every position besides pitcher and catcher, and that becomes a valuable guy. Now, is he one of the best?
That's what we want. No, that's what we should have every year. The best utility man should be on the All-Star. That's exactly what we want. I mean, come on. It doesn't make sense. What he said first is what an all-star game should be. Everybody had fun. Everybody here wants to have fun. You want to go to the game? You want to see the stars of the game? Go have fun. That's what you want to see. And, of course, Ned Yost is a manager, and I think he was going to say he likes it this way. How about when I asked him what the players thought? Well, I haven't taken a poll of the players. That was a nice way of saying the players don't like it.
Why?
What do you mean why? The players don't want this ride one game deciding where some of them are going to play their World Series. This is supposed to be a break. This is supposed to be come, tip your cap, have a good time, laugh with the guys on the field, and enjoy it. What it was. It never should have changed into this.
Well, for at least half the players playing in this game, it's an irrelevant factor anyway because they know their teams aren't going to the World Series. And for those few that can, then they'll go out there and try and win the game. I don't think it's that big of a deal. I think that the negative side of it has been overemphasized and the positive side of it has been underemphasized. Now, Tom Verducci was on with Ryan Russillo yesterday here on ESPN Radio, Tom from Sports Illustrated, and he made an interesting point about the way the game is and is not managed. Here was Verducci.
I was talking to John Farrell, the Red Sox manager, the other day about running this game and playing to win. And he said, definitely you want to play the game to win. But at the same time, he said, I felt like I had an obligation to get everybody in the game. Nobody told him that. It's just something that he thought if a guy is named an all-star, makes the trip to the ballpark, he should get into the game. I happen to disagree with that. I think I'd rather see the game played more like a regular game. I'd rather see Trout and Harper take the 4 or 5 at-bats the way Hank Aaron and Willie Mays used to. But I do understand these managers, they want to defer to the players and make sure they get them in the game at some point.
That is one of the hiccups in this, is that if you are an all-star, if you are representing a team, if you give up your days off, I know no one wants to feel sorry for baseball players, but they get very few days off over the course of a 5-month season. You give up your days off to come here. They should get to play in the game. In a perfect world, everyone would get to participate in the game at least a little bit. Now, in a perfect world, everyone who is in the game is an all-star caliber player, is a top-level caliber player, and is capable of helping his team win and thus win home field advantage. So overall, while I understand that it's a flaw in the system, did I like it better when? And I remember Dave Winfield. They played an extra inning all-star game. He played the entire time.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And was it better when they did that? Sure, because the very biggest stars are the ones that most people want to see. But this way, the kid who's growing up in some town where their season stinks and they only have one guy in the game, at least he gets to see him getting at bat. I think that it's better than nothing.
Yeah, all right. Well, listen, we're not going to agree on this. I don't like the rule. I do like the fact they play everybody. It is an all-star game. You get voted in, you come here. I think you should be able to play in this game, and I just hate what rides on it.
All right, and then one final thought on this, and we'll move on to other business, and that is that I mentioned there are now 20 players, 25 and under, who will be taking part in this World Series, which means none of them remember that today is the 45th anniversary, and it was in the open. Today, does anyone in the room know what it's the 45th anniversary of? Today is the 45th anniversary of Pete Rose taking out Ray Fosse in the All-Star game, which in this town is obviously a very popular thing.
Everybody here is cheering, except if there were members of the Fosse family here, they wouldn't be.
Yeah, Ray Fosse not quite as excited.
Yeah.
There's a gentleman in our crowd with a sign that says Free Pete, and there are certainly a lot of Pete Rose fans here, and we spent a lot of yesterday talking about it. I think that one of the fears of this, and at one point I thought to myself that this would have been the perfect time for baseball to announce something with Pete Rose. I realize now what a mistake that would have been, and I don't want to let it happen today, is you don't want to let this All-Star game become a referendum on Pete Rose.
Right, you don't. Yeah.
Pete Rose has had his day. He will have his day.
He's
going to get a chance to meet with the commissioner. Joe Torre talked about it yesterday. He'll have his day. He'll have his chance, and maybe he will get a chance to come back into baseball. But these couple of days should be about this year's All-Stars and those young kids.
I agree, and we have both talked about that and thought what a great place it would be for that to happen, possibly happen. And you're right. It's better that it doesn't. This is for the guys that are here in the baseball of today. today. So I'm glad it's not, as you mentioned, Pete's going to have his day. So on we go. I thought a great home run derby. Let's hope we get a great game tonight. And I'll say it again because I've talked about it every time she sang it. The young lady who sang the national anthem last night, Marlena Van Hoos,
is phenomenal.
Is just incredible. If you don't know about her, you could Google her and read her story. It's just unbelievable. And I said at this point, Taylor Swift should be halftime of the Super Bowl, and this young lady should be singing the national anthem at the Super Bowl as well. She sang it last night. It's one of the best I've ever heard. It was just fantastic.
Mike and Mike.
Geico presents Strange Saving Stories. Astronomers detected an interstellar transmission. It stated, Geico, 15 minutes could save you 15% or more. The implications were staggering. Was the cosmos telling us we could all save hundreds on car insurance with Geico? Or did their radar merely pick up a signal from the nearby Rufus and Clyde's morning show? We may never know.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
We're right across the street from the ballpark. Another huge crowd is here. The sun is coming up. And, Mike, it is looking to be sort of a pretty morning.
It's going to be a great morning, and I don't think a great afternoon, unfortunately.
Is that when the weather is coming? Well, it was supposed to come last night, and then the forecast changed.
You're right, so maybe it happened again.
We were having lunch yesterday, and all of a sudden, it was like Auntie-M. A twister was coming in. It became like pitch black dark outside, and hail the size of golf balls was falling. But then last night, by the time we got on the field, everything worked out just fine.
Very nice, and the home run derby was fantastic. I didn't really see any negative talk about how it moved with the clock instead of the 10 outs. And when the hometown kid, Todd Frazier, wins it, I think that helps a whole lot.
Speaking of hometown kids, I said it yesterday, there are a few places in this country where baseball is still feels to me when the second I get off the plane like I've stepped back into the 1970s when it comes to baseball. And I guess that's an appropriate thought for me to welcome our next guest who has joined us here on our set. What can we say? He was a Hall of Fame inductee on the first ballot in 1989, a 10-time Gold Glove winner, a 14-time All-Star, a 2-time NL MVP, and the MVP of the 1976 World Series. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny Bench is here.
Nice crew, huh?
Is his mic on? I don't hear him.
Am I on? Yeah, here we go.
There we go.
We're live and thank you. Nice to be with you. Thanks for coming to Cincinnati.
Wow. They're excited to see Johnny Bench in Cincinnati. The fans are fabulous.
You know, the great thing about Cincinnati is these people are 2 hours away. When you go Indianapolis, Columbus, Louisville, Lexington, these people drive. They come here. They can actually support the town, support the game, and then go back home. But these are 80% of our attendance came from outside of Cincinnati. These are the people that came all the time, that drove 2 hours, watched the ball game, and then drive back home. These are the real fans that really made all of our decade of the 70s and what we became.
Perhaps I know that I refer back to that era a lot, but that's when I was a kid. My first memories of being a baseball fan, in all honesty, I grew up in New York and I was a Yankee fan, and I remember crying in the 1976 World Series because you guys were maybe not you personally, but you were stealing bases on Thurman Munson, who was my favorite player, and I felt terrible about it, and all the rest of that. But that was, to me, I've always said, I'm not old enough, obviously, to have seen the 27 Yankees or any of those Yankee teams in the 50s. To me, the Big Red Machine is the greatest baseball team I ever saw. Do you consider... When you guys get together, and we had Barry Larkin up here yesterday, we saw Rob Dibble recently, and they're celebrating the 25th anniversary of their championship in 1990, which is all great. When you guys get together all these years later and you know, have your reunions and just are hanging out together, whatever it is you do you guys talk about being the greatest team of all time?
No.
It never comes up?
It's our 40th anniversary, and we just sort of, the thing we hear, Greeny, just like you said, is the fact that wherever I go in this country, I don't care what fan they were a Cub fan, they were done. They said they really respected our ball club. They really admired what we did. And when you start naming the lineup and you have the big four, then you start talking about the great eight.
And those other four are just guys like George Foster, who had 52 home runs. Ken Griffey, who was one of the greatest right fielders, could play any position, steal bases. You had Cesar Geronimo, who was an all-star. He was a Gold Glover, hit 300. And Dave Concepcion, who I think should be in the Hall of Fame, he won 5 Gold Gloves. He won 5 Gold Gloves. And my argument is, and I told Ozzie Smith this, if you hadn't come into the league, Davey would have won 10 Gold Gloves, and it would have been a whole different perspective on what David Concepcion. We really don't. I mean, we are still, it's just like going back into the locker room, everybody giving everybody grief. Somebody will make a decision which is the greatest, which is not the greatest. How do we know where the Athletics were in Philadelphia and how we know the Yankees were? We are just really proud of the fact of what we achieved. We had lost 2 World Series in 70 and 72. We're about to lose to the Red Sox, looks like, and we would have been the Buffalo Bills.
Right.
We would have been that team that got there but never could close it. And so I think the legacy that we all left when we swept their playoffs in 76, we swept the Yankees, and I think at that time Bob Howsam said we will never have baseball like that again because free agency market came into being. Don Gullett left and then the team broke up. Our biggest loss ever was Tony Perez being traded.
Even though you don't want to admit it about the greatest team ever, there's got to be an unbelievable feeling inside, though. I mean, because I'm sure some of those guys you mentioned, if asked, would say they were the greatest team ever, don't you think?
Oh, every one of us. We'll all say it privately. I mean, somebody will come up and say it and everything else, but it has not got me an upgrade on first class on one occasion. I'm sitting back there and coaching is really happy I'm fine and everything else. Aren't you Johnny Bench from the greatest team ever? Come on up front. They don't do that for some reason.
Still waiting on that one.
I'm still on there. I'm still going through security, and they're still patting me down. I got my artificial hips. I'm going off in the machine. And, Johnny, we don't know who
that is. Johnny Bench is with us. We're presented by Progressive Insurance. You can test drive Snapshot, even if you have insurance with another company. See how much you can save before you switch.
I mean, just that last line made me think of it. Oh, we don't know who he is. Do you think, and football went through this for a while. I talked to a few of the guys that I played with when we were getting to the end of our careers, and guys were coming in the beginning of theirs, and some of my old teammates were saying just some of these young guys just didn't know enough about the history of the game. Do we find that now, or do you think these guys know more about the history or not?
I think they've learned in the last few years. I think people were embarrassed the fact that they never heard of who we are. But, in reality, these people are probably old enough, they're in their 40s and everything else, but to go back and think we won our championship 40 years ago. You had to really be 45 to 50 years old, and you're almost in that era that people now grew up with us. But when you get past, Johnny Bench, then you got to have your grandfather tell you. I say, yeah, that's Johnny Bench. He played back when I was a young boy, and it's like it's not the recognition part of it, but I have seen the last few years more awareness, and that's part of baseball. Baseball has to do a job in itself of bringing back the people that have created the history of the game and involving them, like on the field, and seeing Eric Davis and seeing Barry Larkin here. And they try to do that at all-star games. But sometimes it's sort of like we're in the now moment. And so we really don't include the history of the game. And all these guys, all of us in the past, really would still want to be a part of the game. But it just seems like there's always an agenda that has to precede that.
Mike and Mike, the great Johnny Bench is here with us. Green Diamond Gallery is a hidden treasure in Cincinnati. It has the greatest collection of baseball history and memorabilia outside of Cooperstown. The All-Star game in Cincinnati and Green Diamond Gallery is just 15 minutes
Have you been there?
away from the ballpark. I have not. I'd love to see
they
it.
have 4,000 signed items. I have been there 10 times. I will walk through that, and I will still stop again and look. Balls from everybody. I said in the history of the Hall of Fame, they've got a Negro League section, and he's got 200 autographs from the Negro Leagues. The picture itself of them, it is most phenomenal. Uniforms, bats, history, and it's just fabulous. And you can go down the line what we have here in Cincinnati: the zoo, Kings Island. We have the arts. We have food, which I know both of you have taken.
Enjoy that. Right.
We've had our ribs. We've gone to Jeff Ruby's. We've eaten Grater's ice cream. We've had Skyline, and we've really experienced every part of what Cincinnati is. But this is a different culture here. These are the people that really are old German that are stuck right here, and they want to do it, and they love their game, and they love the idea that they can wear their medal and their badge of honor of saying we were America's first team. But that is one of the great things. Plus, he does so much for the Miracle League. Bob Crotty's the owner of that. It was, one of those guys that started when he was 6 years old, started riding athletes, and he started mowing a yard and buying something. And then all of a sudden he realized he had 4,000 items or 10,000 items in his basement and says, what am I going to do? And he wound up, building this museum.
Oh, that's great. That's terrific.
And like the Reds Hall of Fame. I hope you've been over there.
We have not made it over to that yet. Yeah. But it's a perfect way to segue into the next part of the conversation, which I think is that baseball, I think, of all the sports, does the best job of honoring its past and its tradition, but like everything else, has to also have an eye on its future. And we were just saying, one of the things people liked about the home run derby last night was the clock. How ironic.
Totally.
Baseball has always been the game. The beauty of the game is not having a clock. And they're also trying to speed the game up a little bit in the actual game itself, forgetting the home run derby. What are your thoughts on the idea of speeding up the game of baseball up to and including the possibility of a pitch clock on the center field wall that everybody could see?
But they were doing that back in the 80s. And they were going to change the price of gas in the 70s, and cars were going to have 20 miles per gallon in 1970 and everything else. The problem exists is the fact, okay, you want to shorten the game? We're going to cut our commercials between innings to 45 seconds.
Not going to happen.
No. I don't think so. But when we played, it was like 45 seconds between an inning. And so, now it's 2:02, 2:10, 2:20. So if you add 2 to 4 minutes per inning, all of a sudden now at 9 innings, you've made the game 30 minutes longer. So it really is a matter of the fact. I love the idea the guys are standing in the batter's box now. I love the fact that last night I didn't have to watch after every swing gyrations and fixing the glove, although Albert would have loved to have fixed that glove.
Yeah, he did right. Knocking them all on the ground.
He's like trying to figure out, why did I use that timeout? I can't get this glove to work on this bat, and grab me some pine tar, do some spray. And that was one of the most enjoyable shows I've seen. I think they've done a tremendous job. How much or what they need to tweak it or not, and of course our boy won. So
he did. And even though the game at this point is about 8 to 10 minutes quicker, I don't know if it's so much about the time as the pace. The pace just seems better and quicker. And I know they say they have the lights to know when the guy needs to be done warming up, coming back from commercial, so when we talk about a pitch clock or anything that cuts down time, I don't think it's time. Do you think that the pace of the game needs to be faster?
I just think, get in the batter's box, the pitcher looks in. It was like watching Federer at Wimbledon. He got the ball, he bounced it once, whoop, sir. And here's the guys there. Boom, boom, boom.
Djokovic has 10 bounces, by the way. He was doing it so much I was counting after 10 bounces.
Yeah, some people. And here, you got, Dahl doing the and the crack and the do and the boom. And so we start to say how long is too long and everything else. You get a pitcher throws a no-hitter and you're saying, now we got to go home. It went so fast. The game went so fast. I don't know what 20 minutes in our lives is. It's less time on our iPad. It's less time texting. All these people up here now are in the game, and they're up there texting and Twittering and video and Instagram and everything else. So they're up there doing it. They don't even care what the pitch clock is. They're so involved in taking a selfie and doing stuff and say, hey, look who's over there, and I'm sitting here. It's supposed to be a social event. The real fan is going to go out there, appreciate the game of baseball, and then they're going to walk away saying, 50,000 people will see the game, 25,000 will leave unhappy, 25,000 people will leave sad, and they saw the same thing. So I'd like to have things faster in my life. At my age, I want everything to be a little better and a little faster. They're tweaking. They're doing everything they possibly can, and the instant replay is there, and I like it, and there's just good things still. It's a great game, and we just have to focus on so many great young athletes and players.
There are. That's the next point. Mike, the great Johnny Bench is with us. There are now, with some of the players who have been named as replacements, 20 players on the rosters tonight who are 25 years of age or younger, and which is a magnificent thing for the sport, obviously. Great young talent. They're coming up younger, and they're more ready to play, more physically ready to play younger. We actually looked this up. On your roster, the 1975 Cincinnati Reds roster, 40 years ago, your team, there was not a single player who was listed at 200 pounds. 35 of the players on the Reds today are listed at 200 pounds or more. So clearly the athletes have gotten bigger, they've gotten stronger, they've gotten faster. Whether that makes the game better or not, you were seeing a more athletic game of baseball, right?
I weighed 217 in 1975, so we lied about the cards, it's like women who lie about their age and their weight. I lied about my weight as well, but we never did have the opportunity. When money came in and all of a sudden people got personal trainers and they went to the blender era where everybody started putting all the proteins in, and you even will tell everybody how your training changed when the Cybex and all this stuff. You're doing isometrics. Well, I never lifted a weight. Only thing I ever lifted in my life was peanut sacks. I grew up pulling cotton and combining peanuts. Then you'd have to go to get the peanuts and you'd combine them. They dry out. You'd pick up an 80-pound sack. I'm in the 8th grade. I'd lift it up, put it on my head, and then throw it up on the truck. And I had no idea that I was getting stronger, but they never wanted you to touch weights. They never wanted you to, involve anything that would create a tightness across the chest that would limit your throwing.
So these players today, though, as Greeny mentioned, bigger, faster, stronger, doesn't necessarily equate to better. We were talking to Ned Yost yesterday, and he said he thinks now the staffs do more coaching than they've ever had to do because the younger players are coming in, and physically they're ready to go, but the nuances of the games and some of the basic fundamentals they just don't have down.
Yeah, I don't think they watch. I think they decide they work on a style. Everybody became better because they saw me catch and they saw Ozzie Smith play shortstop. Everybody was able to emulate. I think you emulate great athletes. I think you emulate swings. I think when I was in a slump, I watched guys who were swinging the bat well. I would go out and watch batting practice, see what the guys were doing, so I'd know how to pitch them. If they did certain things, I pitched to them. If they didn't do certain things, I didn't pitch to them. But, in 1968, I was 20 years old when I made the All-Star team. And I'm sitting in my locker in the Astrodome. And I'm trying not to move because I'm not going to spike Willie Mays and Hank Aaron and Willie McCovey or anybody else across there. And Willie Mays is sitting across from me. And he walks right over my locker and he said, "You should have been the starting catcher." And I didn't need to do anything else in my life. 20 years of age, Willie Mays saying that to me. So, an All-Star game is very, very special. I was really cocky. I mean, I was one of those kids and they had a table like this, and it was on the table were the things that you could pick out as your All-Star gift. You had tankards, you had platters, you had this, you had that. And Warren Giles is the manager or the president of the National League. And he said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I think I'll take those mugs. I'll get that other stuff later."
Wake up on the bright side with Johnny Bench, brought to you by La Quinta Inns and Suites. They take care of you so you can take care of business. Book now at LQ.com. 2 other orders of business. You talk about the All-Star game. And Mike and I have spent a lot of time over the years talking about how now home field advantage in the World Series rides on it. And part of the reason why I think I think it's a good thing is that I think based upon the fact that players play on so many teams now, they don't necessarily play with just one league, and there is interleague play all year long, there isn't that kind of pride. Back in your era, how important was it to you and the guys in the National League to win the World Series, that the National League was the better league?
Oh, Warren Giles came in and made this speech. We are the better league. We are going to win. We are going to beat them and everything else. And I played in 14. We won 11 out of the 14. Joe Morgan likes to say that he won all 10 that he played in. So that's the pride thing that really goes into it. I'm not big on this winning thing. I mean, the problem exists is if we're going to vote as a popularity thing, then everybody wants those guys sort of in the game. I don't want to see one guy take one at bat and leave, though. I hate that. Mays and those guys, and they play all the game and they do the stuff. And there are just certain all-stars that are a head and shoulders, let's face it, above the others. And I'm sorry, okay, I'm not going to get anybody hurt. It's a long season. I don't think playing for another 4 innings is going to hurt certain people.
I agree with that. Then the other thing, of course, as the All-Star game comes here to Cincinnati, is that the subject of your former teammate Pete Rose comes up again and again and again. And I mentioned that I saw him the other night. I ran into him in a restaurant, and I see him with the fans, and I understand that his wounds are self-inflicted, and so much of what he's done to himself, and yet I couldn't help it. I found myself feeling somewhat sorry for him, and Mike and I spent almost all day yesterday talking about it. It's not once and for all, because you've answered this question probably a million times over 25 years.
Well, that was my Hall of Fame year. That was nothing like being able to say, "Hey, congratulations on being in the Hall of Fame. What about Pete?"
Exactly.
for 26 years. And so,
what do you think?
In 8th grade, Mrs. Tate our civics teacher said something. You make your own bed, you've got to sleep in it. And we know, I've been on committees where we've given Pete chances to turn it around. And it's not up to me. I think a lot of people think I'm keeping him out of the Hall of Fame, and no, it's baseball. It's the rules. It's the commissioner's choice now. But you have to understand also that the commissioner now is dealing with one guy who is on suspension. He has 11 guys on suspension. If you go back in the history, 11 guys have been suspended. So how do you approach that? In what order do you approach it? And the fact is, it's always been up to Pete. Pete had the chance to diffuse this before it was ever happened. He had a chance in 2 different occasions when I was on a committee, Mike Schmidt and Joe Morgan, and with the commissioner, had it all lined out and everything else. It didn't take. It was like you have to hear by these rules, and it didn't happen. Then it was again, and it didn't happen. So the thing that I think bothers baseball, the higher ups, is the fact that whether Pete makes the Hall of Fame, whether he's elected, where he's on the ballot or whatever, he wants to be back in the game of baseball, which in a lot of instances scares baseball. I mean, the fact that if you're 20 games out in September and you hire Pete to be a manager, I think there'll have to be restrictions and everything else. Look, he was as good, finest competitor I've ever known in my life. He's been my business partner. We have laughed together. We have done everything together. There's no better competitor that's ever put on a uniform. But again, it's like, if the rules are going to be there, okay, fine. Admit to what you're doing, first of all. Admit to it. Stand up to it. If you're going to face everything the way you've faced everything always in your life, and you've been in the 5 different positions, you've made the all-star team, and you faced every challenge. That's what Sparky said. He was facing every challenge. He would try harder than anybody. That's what he has to do. That's what he's had to do for a long time, is face up to the challenge, admit to what the problems are, and first of all, admit it to himself. And then from that point on, now we can make progress. But we're still talking about this 26 years later and saying, Pete, why don't you just do this? And if he's faced every challenge, this has to be the biggest challenge of all. And he's still man enough to do it, and I wish he would.
So, do you wish he would? I mean, so do you think it's not too late, or do you think we're getting past the point now?
I think if he went into it, the last meeting I had was 3 years ago with Bud Selig. I sat with him. I said, Bud, make him go into counseling. Make him go get into help. And if he comes out and he realizes he has the problem, if he's able to fall on his knees, then he'll say to America, we will forgive him. Everybody in this country has forgiven everything that's ever gone on. And if he will say, I have no idea I had this problem. I mean, it hurts all of us, because if he would say and realize, I have a problem. I need to get over this. I need to get eradicated. I need to be where I am so that I can be, at least an opportunity to be back. But more importantly, don't worry about the Hall of Fame. Worry about yourself. Worry about healing yourself and being that and getting away from an addiction that affects a lot of us. And here we are, next thing we'll know, we'll talk about another fantasy deal and $3 million of giveaways, and yet we're still involving baseball with some form of gambling. So it really kind of sends a different kind of message.
I can't tell you what a thrill this is. For a kid who grew up in the 1970s watching baseball and the greatest catcher of all time, what an honor to have you here. Thank you, Johnny. Ladies and gentlemen, Johnny, thanks.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Bumgarner looking into post. Gordon down the line at third. Again, the 2-2 pitch, and a swing and a ball popped up. This is going to be in play in foul territory for Sandoval, and the Giants have won the World Series again.
Again, the operative terms. They have won 3 World Series in the last 5 years. He is the winningest manager in Major League Baseball today, and tonight will be managing his 4th All-Star game from the National League. Of course, the San Francisco Giants. The great Bruce Bochy has joined us here on our set in Cincinnati. What a pleasure to see you, Skipper. Thanks for coming by.
Hey, guys. It's good to be here. Thanks for having me on here.
Still
big
sound
day
good?
today. Yeah, we're all excited about the game tonight.
And that's just, I still can't get over hearing the word again. Winning another World Series. And I mean, are they just different, or is anyone better?
They're different. They all had their own story. The last one, I think, was the most amazing, really. I mean, we go back to 12 when, we were facing death there, 6 or 7 straight games. But last year we had to do the wild card route. We had to go to Pittsburgh as a wild card and win there, and their record there was really unbelievable. And of course had to beat Washington, as the road team, and then St. Louis. So and now we have to go in Kansas City because the American League won the World Series the year before, and end up being the road team there and having to win there in the 7th game. So I really think last year was the most amazing for me, and of course what Bum did. I mean, Madison, we just had our horse and we rode him through the whole thing.
Yeah, but figuratively and to some degree literally as well. with Bumgarner, who remarkably, sometimes I have to remind myself of this when I see the stats, is still only 25 years old. We're talking about the infusion of enormously talented young players in the sport, which I'd love to get your thoughts on. There were 20 players in the All-Star game tonight who were 25 years of age or younger, which is a record. We're seeing great young talent in the sport, and the fact that Bumgarner himself is still only 25 and to have accomplished what he's accomplished is remarkable.
It really is, and sometimes you forget how young he is now because he's been around so long.
Right.
In 2010, he goes in Texas and against that great hitting ball club and shuts them out for 8 innings. And I say the same thing about Bryce Harper. He's only 22. It seems like he's been playing longer than that, but we have some unbelievable young players, talent, Chris Bryant, Trout. These guys, they are not only good young players, they're great young players that are probably heading to the Hall of Fame, to be honest.
We just had the stat a moment ago. This is the 3rd All-Star game in which Bryce Harper is the youngest player, which is incredible if you think about it. Let's talk about the youth. We had Ned Yost here yesterday in that very seat, who you'll manage against tonight and whom you managed against in the World Series, and he talked about the great young players in the sport today, players coming up more quickly than they ever have before, having all of the talent in the world, but maybe not necessarily the understanding of the game that players did in previous generations, and thus you're doing more coaching on the major league level than you had perhaps a generation ago. Have you had the same experience?
Oh, I agree with that. I do think we are rushing these guys, and not really rushing. There's a need, and you have to fill that. And I'll look at our guys as they came up. Brandon Bell, we brought him up, and he probably hadn't been seasoned enough, and you do have to work with these guys and teach them more, and you can't assume they know the game because they're not getting as much time down there. Pablo Sandoval, Buster Posey. Buster was a shortstop in college, converted, and we signed him, and we shot him through our system. Tim Lincecum, I'm not sure how many starts, but it wasn't very many in the minor leagues. And the one thing about Brian Sabian, our GM, he'll get a young player, and if he thinks he's ready, now he knows that there's going to be some growing pains with these guys, but we're going to be a better club because of them. He'll bring them up. We'll bring them up from Double-A. And last year, Matt Duffy, he's in Richmond playing for the Squirrels, and we had a need, and now he's our everyday third baseman doing a great job. So it's a credit to their talent. Sure, they probably still need some teaching, but these guys are that good that you can rush them up.
They are that good, or just from the fan watching, it's a wow factor. But from you and the intricacies of the game, is it more of physical things they need to learn, physical nuances of the game, or the mental aspect, the IQ of the game?
I think more the mental side, the little things that need to be done, move a runner, bunting, run into bases, these things, and this comes with time. And in my day, you spent on the average probably 4 years in the minor leagues, and these guys are coming up in a couple of years. But when you throw the way these guys are throwing, like a Bumgarner, or swinging the bat the way a Sandoval or Posey are doing, you push these guys up. And I think if you look at the payroll on these clubs, you got to have guys come up through your system so you can keep it under control. So that's why you're rushing these young players up to fill those needs.
Mike and Mike, Bruce Bochy is here, manager of the National League All-Star team tonight, selecting Zach Greinke as your starting pitcher, which is an easy choice with Max Scherzer not here. And Greinke's ERA being 1.3 something, which would be historically great if he manages it for the entirety of the season. If Scherzer was here, do you know which choice you would have made?
It would have been a lot tougher. It really would have been. And Scherzer, what he's done has been remarkable too. But I still think you got to look at what Greinke's done. The last 5 games, the guy hasn't given up a run. I mean, this is historic numbers. His ERA, it's the lowest since 1968, and has 17 quality starts, the most in a major. So I still think he would have the edge, as much as I love Scherzer and what he's done, and had a 3 or 4 unbelievable game run, but still Greinke, those numbers are stupid.
And then when you look at the pitching decisions, again, this is your 4th All-Star game as a manager, so you're the one who has to make these choices. You know that other managers, and you would feel the same way, they don't want to see their guy out there throwing in the All-Star game. We had this discussion at great length with Max Scherzer, or about him yesterday. How do you handle that? How do you handle that decision? Do you talk to the managers on the other teams about how they want their guy used? What is the etiquette as far as you're concerned as the manager?
Well, we do check with the manager, and Dave Righetti check with the pitching coach too, to see how much we can use these guys. Now, we have run in a couple issues, I think, with this pitching because a lot of managers don't want you to use their guy. Well, I have to go in and show the commissioner that I have 16 innings of pitching. Back in Milwaukee, they had the tie ball game, and they're trying to avoid that. So here you're having managers say, please don't use my guy, but if they're coming here, they're available. You have to tell their manager, hey, we need them, we have to use them. Or, we all would like to keep our guy fresh and start him the first game back. But, hey, we grew up, we couldn't wait for the All-Star game. We couldn't wait for that guy to get out there and pitch, or our favorite players. So, if they're coming here, they're available. If not, we'll get somebody else.
Just how much different do you treat this game from a managing standpoint? You've been involved in baseball a long time, so go before, when the All-Star game didn't have what it has riding on it now, and just kind of the texture of the game, the way it was run and the way it was managed.
Yeah, it's different. It's different now than back in '99 when I managed my first one in Boston. I had guys coming up going, hey, I just want one at bat, if I can. I need a rest, but they know what's at stake now. So you'll see guys getting 3 at bats, and the game is playing with more meaning right now. So those guys are going to stay out there. I'll have some guys that that won't play. And my biggest concern in Boston was to get them all in there. That's over. Now, I know what's at stake, and I've been fortunate. I've been there 3 times the last 5 years to realize how important this game is.
So that is the line, because there are those that say if you make it to an All-Star game, the old adage, everybody should play. Now, do the players know that? Know basically that, hey, some of you guys, congrats for being here, but you may never see the field.
Sure they do, and especially the pitchers, because, again, you have to show 16 innings of pitching, so I can't use them all the first 9. But the players, too. I've got to have some reserves in case something happens. I've got a third catcher. Grandal probably won't play, to be honest, unless I got a pinch run for Yachty there toward the end of the game. I'll probably keep Tulo back. I've already told him that. I may pinch hit him, and I'll probably keep an outfielder back in case of injury. So I've got to cover myself.
Bruce Bochy is here with us. Mike and Mike, our Sports Center, brought to you by Subway. Hurry into Subway today for the new turkey and bacon guacamole, as if tender sliced turkey breast and crispy bacon weren't delicious enough. Adding new Subway guacamole takes it to a whole new level. You got to try it. Subway, eat fresh. People now, I think, almost unanimously refer to you as the preeminent manager in the sport. And I've always believed that a manager's primary function in Major League Baseball, sure, you have to handle your pitching and all of that, but it's to set a tone, to set a philosophy and sort of just to set the tone for a clubhouse and a bunch of guys who are going to have to live together every single day for 6 months. How would you describe your philosophy and how it's evolved over the years of how you manage the pulse of a ball club with the success that you've had throughout the marathon that is a baseball season?
Well, I agree with you. I think our most important job is to run that clubhouse. It's to manage your people. I mean, the game is, that's probably the most fun part. But hopefully you're setting the mood, the tempo for the club and creating atmosphere for these guys, and giving them the confidence and getting them to pull together toward the same goal, and and that's creating a very unselfish attitude and leave that ego at the door. We all like our numbers, but those numbers will be there if you play for the right reason, and we try to build a cause on why we play, and if that cause is big enough, there's usually movement, and so that's what I try to create. But we're all different, but I do think that's my most important job, and not that I'm good at it or anything. I'm not saying that, but that's my goal, is to to have those players all striving to do the same thing, and let's get to the postseason.
And you've hit that goal a few times now, and considered the best manager in the game. So don't you think along those lines, shouldn't the best manager be paid like the highest paid player in the game? So maybe you should get the deal like Stan.
How about
that?
I like that. Well, when I first manager, I go back to my first year. They're getting paid a lot more now, a lot better. And I know my first year, I think it was $150,000. I had a 1-year deal with an option on the next year. Now these new guys are getting a 3-year deal, so it's changing in a good way.
Well, we can probably talk about $300 million somewhere along the line. Bruce, enjoy it tonight. What a pleasure. Thanks for coming by.
Mike and Mike.
And now, for Geico's edition of Stuff Found in Your Car, we go inside your side door pocket.
Hello, yes, the crumpled receipt with gum in it. From your anniversary dinner, you sprang for expensive wine, your server was Beth. That dinner was a couple $100. Money you could get back if you switched to Geico and saved hundreds of dollars on your car insurance. I bet you'd save that receipt, frame it even. But really, where did I go wrong? Was it the corkage fee?
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more on car insurance. Visit geico.com today.
The best of Mike and Mike.
Mike and Mike.
Presiding over his first All-Star festivities as the Commissioner of Major League Baseball. Everybody please welcome Rob Manfred to our set here in Cincinnati. Commissioner, welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Glad to be here. It's been a great few days in Cincinnati.
Your first All-Star experience, your first home run derby, and may I say, it was a home run.
Well, thank you. We did a lot of work. Tony Petiti, in particular, our chief operating officer, on the format. But format only takes you so far. The players got to perform, and Todd Frazier last night just absolutely unbelievable.
Yeah, he did. And as Greeny said, that's part of it you can't control. When a hometown guy does well, that really lifts the crowd. But also, I think an unintended thing that happened last night that in my opinion should stay. It was supposed to be 5 minutes, but I know it went down to 4 because of the thought of the weather coming in. I think those guys were gassed at times, so I think 4 might be the number.
You really are 100% correct about that. I think we were fortunate in the cutback between 5 and 4 because of the strain it put on the players. And we're trying to get like everything we're doing, we're trying to get the event to the right length, keep the excitement, energy high for the whole event, and
it worked.
Yeah, it worked pretty well last night.
We both thought it worked extraordinarily well. In our hotel, we could hear the cheering from the crowd when Frazier hit his home run with the television delay before the ball went out on our TVs.
Yeah, it was great.
So clearly, the energy was there, and it worked well, and it's an interesting example of the ultimate irony. For 150 years, we've said the beauty of baseball is it's the one game without a clock. And yet somehow now, listen, the world that we live in, things happen quickly, and we're seeing a little more evidence of the clock in baseball. Last night, as Mike mentioned, it works out well. And within the sport, the changes that you've made, subtle, to try and speed the game up. How do you feel those are working so far?
Well, I feel very positive about the early returns on pace of game. We're halfway in. We're down about 9 minutes in terms of average game time, which is good. But I think more important, I've talked to the players on 29 of the 30 teams. I have one straggler I have to take care of still. But the most important thing is the players are positive about it. And Mike, you know this. Once you're on the field, when you're trying to do something, it's all about the players. If you got the players with you, it's going to go well. If you don't, it's not going to go so well.
What was there from the beginning of the season of what was told was going to be implemented, not no clock on the wall or anything, but just how the pace was going to be picked up? Was there some resistance of players, especially guys that didn't feel like, they wanted to be able to step out of the batter's box and do their things? And if so, have they gotten past it?
Yeah, there was a little at the beginning. I think the important part during the off season, I had my on-field group, Joe Torre, and the folks we always look to on on-field matters. But we put Tony Clark in the process really early. We experimented in the Arizona Fall League, so people got some feel for what is all this going to look like out on the field. And I think having Tony in the process, him speaking about the experiment positively to the players when he was meeting with them, gave us a nice start to the season.
I tell you what else, we had Tony here yesterday, and the dynamic right now of the relationship, and look, we're not behind closed doors as you are, you know things we don't know, but at least from the outside looking in, the dynamic of the relationship right now between Major League Baseball in the transition from Bud to yourself and the Players Association, if you just juxtapose it with what we're dealing with on a daily basis covering pro football, it's been remarkable. How would you describe your relationship right now with Tony Clark and the players as you look to another collective bargaining agreement, which is not that far away?
Well, we have a very positive, respectful relationship that goes deep in the two organizations. It's not about Rob Manfred and Tony Clark. Dan Hallam, our chief legal officer, does all our labor work. Great relationships with a number of people over there. We try to do positive things in between agreements. We did a great thing yesterday. We had all this tax money that we had collected out of the international system, and we agreed to spend $30 million on the development of youth baseball and softball in the United States. Had a nice press conference, and 8 All-Stars showed up in the front row to support the deal Tony had made with us and the effort that we are undertaking. And it's those little things that really help you over the long haul.
And while I think people love seeing the names like an Albert Pujols back in this All-Star game, his first time as an Angel, a guy that was here all the time as a Cardinal. You can't help but notice with a couple additions, as Greeny said, the number now, 20 players that are under 25 years old, and where this game is going. I mean, I could see why there has to be some unity between players and league. It does all seem to be working pretty well right now from that aspect.
It's interesting. The game had a huge transition last year. I mean, obviously, Bud led the sport for 23 years. He was a great leader. Elected a new commissioner, and it seemed like at exactly the same time the Derek Jeter and that generation sort of all moved on at once, and the young crop that we have is just phenomenal. I mean, just absolutely so talented, great young men, and we feel like we have a huge opportunity to move the sport forward with them, and I think they have that same sense that that's what we want to do.
The idea to create national stars. You have a little bit of it working with Mike Trout, a little bit with Bryce Harper, and now you've got guys like Chris Bryant and Correa and some of the others who've come up. How do you make it so that every kid in America wants to be Chris Bryant? In a world where now the kids want to be Odell Beckham Jr. and they want to be LeBron James, my 12-year-old son, how do you make him want to be Chris Bryant?
It's like any other part of business, I think. We are in competition for kids. It's part of our business. We have to accept that it's part of our business. We have to do everything possible to make baseball appealing to young people, because the trick is if you get them playing the game as a kid, the chance that they're going to be an avid fan goes up dramatically. And we're working hard with USA Baseball. We think it's very important to have an integrated amateur structure. We do pretty well, 8 to 12. Steve Keener in Little League, great partner. They do a good job for us. I mean, who else's 12-year-old World Series is on ESPN?
Right.
I mean, it's that next age group where the amateur activity is more fragmented that we really need to be better. The second thing we need to do, and again, it applies particularly in the 13 to 18 group, sports that are growing with kids have appropriate or age-appropriate modifications. Like tennis has done a great job, big racket, small court. We get into that 13-year-old, you've probably seen it with your own kids, exactly how big is the field going to be? What's the right size? Do you go all the way from the Little League field to the Major League field? And we need to get unified and coherent on those sorts of issues to be competitive.
So while you've been around this game for a long time, and certainly, through Bud Selig's time, been right there with him, but now that you're running the show in the short time you've been doing it, what's maybe surprised you the most, maybe unexpected that you didn't maybe see coming from being the commissioner of baseball?
I'll tell you something. I've been around the game for so long. When you have this job, the one thing that you realize is how deeply people feel about the game. You can get caught up. People write about the game. Baseball's not growing, this, that. The fact of the matter is, we have an unbelievable fan base. We've already drawn 40 million people this year. At the All-Star break, we've drawn 40 million people. Our local ratings are absolutely phenomenal. 7.5 million people a day open up at bat. And that ardor for the game, the love of the game, just kind of it envelops you once you're in the job, and you understand it, I think, a lot better than even when you're working in the game.
Mike and Mike were presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, our guest right now is Rob Manfred, the Commissioner of Major League Baseball. And you know, for the longest time I was campaigning, I wanted this job. There were a
lot of candidates out there.
and listen, if I may bring it up again, would it have killed you guys to put my name in the ballot?
Oh, my God.
I know I wouldn't have gotten any votes, but would it have killed you just to have a sense of humor? Put me in there. But okay, that aside. That aside. Here's another example of why I could not have done your job. So 2 days ago, when I got to Cincinnati, my wife was with me, we went out for dinner, and as I'm walking into a restaurant, Pete Rose walks out. And he didn't see me, and I watch him walk. I watch 100 people are following him. He stops, he's taking pictures with everybody, he's joking around, he couldn't be more jovial and friendly, and I'm standing there and I said, oh, come on, put him in the Hall of Fame. You got to put him in the Hall of Fame. Everybody loves him. And obviously, but I didn't.
See what you started?
I didn't mean that.
You did?
Okay, so, and obviously, we got it. Let me ask the question. That moment probably isn't the right moment to make that decision. I'm guessing that you probably won't run into him walking out of a restaurant and say, you know what the heck, he suffered enough. We had Johnny Bench sitting here earlier this morning, right where you're sitting right now, and he took a pretty strong position on Pete Rose, one that has taken a lot of our listeners to at least some degree by surprise. Let's let you hear a little bit of that. This was Johnny Bench with us earlier this morning.
It's not up to me. I think a lot of people think I'm keeping out of the Hall of Fame, and it's baseball. It's the rules. It's the commissioner's choice now. But you have to understand also that the commissioner now is dealing with one guy who is on suspension. He has 11 guys on suspension. If you go back in the history, 11 guys have been suspended. So how do you approach that? In what order do you approach it? And the fact is, it's always been up to Pete. Pete had the chance to diffuse this before it was ever happened. He had a chance in 2 different occasions when I was on a committee, Mike Schmidt and Joe Morgan, and with the commissioner, had it all lined out and everything else. It didn't take. It was like you have to hear by these rules, and it didn't happen. And it was again, and it didn't happen.
And that was a little taste of Johnny Bench from earlier this morning, making the point that at the end of the day, this is all about making your own bed and sleeping in it. And clearly I understand that. So I'll frame the question to you this way. I know that you're going to have a meeting with him at some point soon. You've said it and others have as well. What criteria will you use to make a decision here? This is somewhat uncharted territory. What will you be considering, and what is it you're interested? What will you be weighing as you go about making a decision that, what its big picture significance to baseball may not really compare to some other things, but you know it's going to get as much attention as anything you will ever decide. What criteria will you use to make this decision?
Well, it's interesting. From the beginning, I've said, I really want to understand all of the underlying facts, and I think even since Pete applied for reinstatement, it's become clear that the facts are an evolving state of affairs. And so I think it's really important. We've spent a ton of time on the initial investigation. Obviously everything you find in an investigation isn't public. We've gone back. One of the people that's helping me on this project just has boxes and boxes of stuff in his office that we've gone through. So I think it's important to understand everything we possibly can about the facts that existed at the time that the original suspension was imposed. The reason that I said I'll meet with Pete, I think it's really important to understand Pete's frame of mind, and I think that's what Johnny was talking about. Understand where he is, how he feels about what has happened, and what's his state of mind going forward. So I'm going to consider all that. I'm going to consider it with an open mind, and I've really worked hard at trying to avoid saying anything that indicates one way or the other how I feel about this, because I think he's entitled to a process that's complete, that's fair, and that I approach with an open mind.
I love the wording of that. The facts are an evolving, ever evolving. That's a very diplomatic way of saying that.
Well, we know at least publicly some more have just come out.
Oh, yes, we know. The facts continue to change every time.
And unfortunately, Pete at times can be his own, more than at times, is his own worst enemy. I'm curious as to a meeting like this. Is it Just the 2 weeks? I mean, is this a large room that's catered, or just, a couple of people sitting around just kind of talking?
One of the advantages that I have, because I was trained as a lawyer and I did a lot of these meetings where, I was the principal person in those meetings, I'm perfectly comfortable doing a meeting like that one-on-one, but I think what the room will look like that day, I'll largely leave up to him, and the reason for that, to Pete, and the reason for that is I want him to feel comfortable in the process, and I want him to be able to give me whatever information he wants to give me in the way that he's most comfortable transmitting it.
Mike and Mike, Rob Manfred is here. Very interesting there. Let's talk about the All-Star Game. I am a proponent of the World Series riding, the home field advantage riding on the outcome of this for a variety of reasons. We've talked about it. Mike and I have argued about this forever. He argued with Bud about it forever. But in a time where and this past weekend, we had 3 interleague series, the specialness of the American League versus the National League doesn't exist anymore. So the idea of creating some other significance to this game, I think, works. I think it makes this game better and bigger and more interesting for a lot of people. Now, some will look at it and say, if we're going to do that, we may have to change a little bit about the way we invite players. The idea of getting everybody involved, of getting every team represented. Is that something that is continuously evaluated by Major League Baseball?
Look, let me start with the biggest picture on this. I think that one of the things we have tried to do in the early part of my tenure is suggest to people that we're willing to think about almost anything. That doesn't mean we're going to change it, but we're willing to have a conversation about it, and that change is a good thing for our game over time. With respect to the specific rule, I went through the period of time where I think our All-Star Game started to lose a little bit of its luster just because players weren't taking it seriously enough. And home field advantage in the World Series matters to guys that are in this game. It affects the way they play the game. It makes the game more competitive, and it makes it better for the fans. So I'm in favor of it. Having said that, I also think that we need to continually evaluate the rules that we use for the All-Star Game in terms of selection, how long players play, to make the game competitive. That's what it should be about for the fans. It has to be competitive to be entertaining.
Yeah, and I guess I'm certainly on the other side of it, but I do understand what Bruce Bochy said. We were talking to him where when he managed in this, I think we said in '99.
Yeah, when he was the Padres.
When he did talk about, guys saying, give me one at bat, that's it. They don't want to be as involved. I get it. But there's something about, maybe it's just a former player in me that says, I hate the fact that something as big as home field is one game, and it involves, a number of players that could be involved in that game, a number of players that won't be involved in that game. And to me, as a former player, I would like the regular season to have that kind of meaning with that many games, and we did this well in the season that there should be some sort of pot of gold at the end of the rainbow for that, and not just at the, the Midsummer Classic.
Well, I just suggest one additional thing for you to think about. I do think this is one place where sports really vary. I know home field advantage in football is a huge deal. I think it is actually in basketball. If you look at the numbers, it's not as statistically significant in baseball as it is in some other sports, number one. Number two, you got to judge all these rules against the alternative. We were alternating. We were.
I said that earlier. This was a step above alternating. The only thing lower than that would have been flipping a coin. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah, so got to work through those. But I do think it's important. The All-Star Game is our jewel event because of the way the World Series works logistically. It's the closest thing that we have to the Super Bowl. You can plan it, you can celebrate the game, and as a result, we need to constantly look at, what are we doing in the game? Are we doing everything we possibly can to make it the best product we can produce?
I like it. Leave it. Mike and Mike and Rob Manfred. So I'll leave it with this. We as you obviously well know, had your predecessor, Bud Selig, on the show 1,000 times over 15 years, and I was always fascinated. He said he would wake up in the morning, and the first thing he checked every single day was the attendance figures. That was his first thing that he would always check. Now that you're the commissioner, what's the first thing you look at every morning?
Well, I do something that Bud couldn't have done because he was not of the same state of mind. I get an email every morning with all of the replays from the night before, and I actually go back through the videos. I play a little game with myself. There's a text description that tells you, here was the original call, here's what happened. I don't read the text. I look at the video and try to decide what I would have done, and you know what? It drives home the point. Our Major League umpires are absolutely phenomenal. How often they get it right, because you even slow motion, you look at these replays, it's so hard to tell on some of them. But that's the first thing I do, and, put you in a position when that owner calls or the GM calls and says, at least you know what they're talking about. So that's the first thing I do in the morning now.
All right, I have one more serious for you, but before that, Bud also, one of the first things he does in the morning is get on the treadmill and watches our show. So I'm imagining...
Yeah, well, I'm a little different, but I will tell you this. I go to the Cornell Club in New York every morning to work out, and I do, in fact, just like Bud, watch you guys in the morning.
Okay, you usually get mad at Greeny for something. All right, now the serious question is, and Greeny, I'm going to bring this up in the last break, because of what's riding on the All-Star game, there is a call for weather. So what if this game gets rained out?
Well, look, we would play, we would hold and play tomorrow as a backup day. That's one of the, people ask you, why don't you move to Wednesday? It solves your Sunday pitcher problem. And one of the reasons we have not done it is, obviously the All-Star game matters now, and we would hold it and try to play on Wednesday.
I'm glad you reminded me of this, Mike, is the notion, because we talked a little bit about this, I wanted Max Scherzer to be here. I wanted Max Scherzer to start the game tonight, despite Zach Greinke's brilliant season, but I completely understand if I'm the Washington Nationals, I'm doing exactly what they did also. Is it impossible? I understand the logistics of the schedule are so complicated. Is a full week for the All-Star game an impossibility, or is that something you think somehow could work because it would solve all of those issues?
I think that a full week for the All-Star game would have to be wedded to move to 154. Let me pick a number. Otherwise, there's just not enough days to give all that time off in the middle of the season. And frankly, you wouldn't want all those off days accumulated like that. It just, puts people in a position where they're playing 25 days in a row, and that's just really hard.
Understood.
Really hard.
Understood. So, but is that even a topic of conversation?
Look, I think the shortened season is something that will be a topic of conversation with the players in 2016. And it does open the doors to a lot of other issues, a longer All-Star break, a different postseason format. So, when you start down that road, you got to realize, okay, now I'm going this way, and this door's open, that door's open. You got a lot of complicated issues to deal with.
It's like if you give a mouse a cookie, is that what the kids read? But actually, if it does extend if you find a way to extend the postseason, your traditionals are going to yell and scream, but you actually will make more money from TV that way, and maybe you make back some of the money you lose in those gate receipts.
Yeah, there's all sorts of trade-offs there. I will say, our postseason format right now, I think one of and it's an example of baseball evolving. One of the best decisions that was made under Commissioner Seeley's leadership was to go for the one-game playoff for the wild cards. People evolved into the decision for a whole host of reasons. Some people wanted it just because of excitement. Other people wanted it because they didn't want the division winners hanging around too long waiting.
Right. But there was also a hard thing to grasp that baseball is always a series sport in the postseason, that it wasn't. But I get why it's one game, and it is very exciting putting everything on that game.
I'll tell you, I actually made it a point to go to all of them last year. I just wanted to see what it was like in the ballpark. And, Pittsburgh, if you recall, the Giants got after him pretty good. Grand Slam, Bumgarner looked absolutely unhittable. But even with all that, the atmosphere in that ballpark in Pittsburgh was the kind of atmosphere we had here last night, and that's what you're looking for night after night.
Mike and Mike, we're presented by Progressive Insurance. Our guests on the Subway Fresh Take Hotline, in this case, here on our set in Cincinnati. Commissioner, it's always a pleasure. Thank you for coming. Enjoy the night tonight. Enjoy the weekend. We'll do this again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Always a pleasure.
This has been the Best of Mike and Mike on ESPN Radio Pod Center. To hear more from Mike and Mike, log on to ESPNRadio.com and become an ESPN Radio Insider.
The Best of Mike and Mike